Hi, my name is Terry Maxwell, and I just want to thank Monica Graves for giving me the opportunity to reach out to all of you to hear my story. My goal is to pass on experience, strength, and hope to women and men that have been in abusive relationships. My story is that I grew up in a very wealthy family, a very prominent family, going to private schools and to country clubs and having the best of everything that I could have. However, that was all a facade because from the ages of 8 to 12, my father sexually abused me. He was a professor emeritus. He had written many books and he's very well known in his profession. I was told that if I ever told anybody about this abuse that I would be killed. So I didn't share it with anybody. I truly don't know whether my mom knew or didn't know about this. I would always go to her if my dad was in the house and say, "Can I please come with you? Can I please come with you?" if she was leaving. And she would always say no. The way she grew up is that the children went to camps and that they had a nanny and they were taken care of, and the mother was off playing tennis and having fun and having cocktails, and that was her life. And she never really grew up from that. I enjoyed my high school years. I had lots of friends. Then I went on into college. Then what happens is I meet my first husband. I'm sitting there on the college steps and I have on this skirt that has frogs and butterflies, and this frisbee comes up to my feet, and this guy with filthy sneakers and long hair and hippie-ish comes over to me and goes, "Gee, what are those frogs looking at?" And my first response is like, "Oh, you gotta be kidding me." And then he is a chef, and he, at his mother's house, he almost burned down the kitchen, but he made duck à l'orange and some very fancy dishes. And what he did is he invited my friends first, who said yes, and then he invited me. So then I finally said yes. So that is how I met him, and that is how I said yes. So anyway, we are starting to create a little bit of a relationship. And at that time, I didn't realize how important it was, but he was caught selling pot in high school. And I had not been exposed to anybody smoking because I was anti-drug. Little by little, I started smoking. I was married with him for 25 years. I ran like a lot of electronic stores, working 6 days a week, minimum of 50 hours. He was running restaurants, so he was working 70, 80 hours. He would come home in the morning, 1 or 2 o'clock. That's like the only time I would see him. And I would wake up and I would make him dinner and we would talk. And that went that way for years until one day I got a phone call from a man who said, "Your husband is having an affair with my wife." Well, that happened one time. And then I can say that it happened 2 or 3 more times. He would be relieved from one restaurant, go to another restaurant. He had 3 counts of sexual harassment against him. And he lied about every one of them. He said he had did absolutely nothing, that these women, they were just trying to climb up. They wanted to be management. It was all them. Second red flag is the drug intake on my first, I'll call him Jake, became heavier and heavier. He did have an anger issue, and you never knew when it was coming or going. Jake really didn't want to have kids. His parents were pushing for kids, so we finally did have a wonderful, beautiful little boy who was my pride and joy. He was just a couple weeks old, and I was in his room. I remember saying to him, "I'm so sorry I brought you into this. This is not a healthy, loving marriage." So I decided for 3 years that I would take off. I didn't want him to have a nanny. I wanted to be the one that was with him. And so during this time, I put together with a partner this multi-million-dollar business and did fantastic. So there was a lot of good things that were going on. You know, we started getting a lot of money coming in. We had a beautiful house. We had a beautiful boat. But he was just controlling and manipulative through everything. He was doing drugs all the time. I was always walking on eggshells. I never knew whether Dr. Jekyll or Mr. Hyde would be home. Would it be my normal husband who I still cared for, or would it be the psycho? One thing that does stand out very hard is when we were dating, and I knew he was Jewish, and I went to temple with him and his parents a couple of times, and I enjoyed it. It wasn't what I grew up with, and it wasn't what I was going to convert to, but I enjoyed it. But when we had our son, I would start making like Easter eggs and putting an Easter egg basket. And when he saw me making Easter eggs, he picked up the pot of eggs and threw them across the kitchen. You're not doing this. We don't celebrate this. Oh, he had an anger management issue, and he refused to go to get any kind of help at all. He would be like perfectly normal, and then if something upset him, you could just see his eyes start to change, like glaze over, and he would puff up, and he would come at you like he was going to do physical violence, and he would be right up in your chest, and he would do that frequently. Regarding sexual relations, when I started getting these fibroids that were the size of like a baseball, he still would have me have sexual relationships with him, which was so painful. And I would be there crying, and he wouldn't. There was nothing. There was no empathy, no nothing. That's breaking all boundaries. That's not showing love. That's not showing empathy. It's not love to your partner. And then with my son, when he was 15 and I had gone into his room for something, I found a bowl, very clean bowl with pot. I'm like, oh no, he's going to go down the same path that his dad is. So what I did is I went to a Naranan meeting, and I said, you know, my son is starting to smoke and I don't want him to go down his father's path. Where can I get help for an innocent, somewhat 15-year-old? And they said, go to Al-Anon meeting. So I went to an Al-Anon meeting with the intent of finding answers on how to take care of my son. And when I went to that Al-Anon meeting, I found that I was supposed to go there. In Al-Anon, I got a sponsor who was actually like the first woman who was like a mom to me, because no one else was there for me. So there are avenues to help. The other avenue that I took that really helped me was the Domestic Violence Center. I thought I was just so crazy, and I couldn't understand. Here I am doing so well in work. I have my good set of friends. I have my druggy friends, have my druggy husband, who now, because he smokes so much, his drive that used to be way up here was down here. So he was now doing very little work, 1 or 2 hours a day if he wanted to, and watching TV, doing nothing. Meanwhile, he would complain about the house wasn't perfect, this isn't done, that's not done. Whatever, all he would do is complain. And there was no thank you for me taking care of all the bills, taking care of the cars, taking care of our son, doing any of that. At the end, we finally went to counseling because he realized I was leaving. So he agreed to go to counseling, and the psychiatrist gave him a test. And on the scale of 0 to 100, 100 being a healthy person, he rated a 6. And then it hit me, this guy, besides the sexual issues, he has some other major issues. And the psychiatrist said to me, he goes, if I give your husband see him 3 times a week, he might move from a 6 to a 9 out of 100. And I'm like, I've just spent 25 years. This is it. This is not healthy. If I stay with you, I will die. And I don't want to die. I want to live. It just hit me like a block of bricks. I cannot stay. I cannot stay. I have done everything I possibly can. I tried to help him. I tried to fix him. I tried to do everything that I could possibly think of. So I went to the Domestic Violence Center, and I was with them 3 years. Once a week, I went for counseling, and I learned through all this. This is verbal abuse, what I had been going through. And I had no idea how bad it was until I started getting out of it, because I was around people that were in unhealthy situations too, so you think it's the norm. I got strong enough. I had a bag packed. I had extra keys packed. I had places where I could go so that I could be safe that he didn't know about. I had put money aside. I had a P.O. box. I had everything all set up. This time it was happening. I went to court and he was removed by the police. When we talked with the attorneys together, he would yell and scream at the attorneys. They were like in shock with his behavior. And they're like, you cannot act like this or you're going to be removed. And 2 times when I had the papers ready for him to be signed and wondering whether he was going to show up, he did show up, and he showed up and he picked up the papers and he ripped up all the papers and he just ran out of the building. Jake came in, destroyed my house, and he brought my son to witness this. For 15 years with my son, I did everything I could to be the best possible mother that I could be. When my son was at our house, I would say, you're not allowed to do drugs, you're not allowed to have alcohol. You cannot leave at 1 or 2 in the morning and just disappear. You are in high school, you have to do your homework, you have to do chores. But when he went to his dad's house, his dad says, you don't have to do any of that. You do whatever you want to do here. So every time that he came back, it took longer and longer for him to be the loving little boy that I was used to having. He was turning into his dad. And then one day he just didn't come home. And so I called his phone. I called his dad. I texted. No response. And I tried this for a couple days. Nothing. I drove down to the apartment that they were living in. You couldn't get in unless you had a password. So I waited outside. I didn't see their car there. And I waited, and I went back a couple times. And meanwhile, I still called. I asked some of his friends that were in the neighborhood where he was, and they didn't know. So I'm thinking he's just going to show up in a day or 2. Then I contact his grandparents, and they don't answer their phone. And then I sent a card, and it got sent back to me, returned to sender in big black bold letters. And then I sent some, that they had to sign. No response. I called, I emailed, I tried to find other friends. So I was being blocked. But I still had the belief that he was coming. And then I found out that they had moved. I didn't even know where they moved to. So a month or 2 goes by. I can't even walk into his room. And I keep calling and emailing and going to places to try to find where he is. I call his grandparents, still no answer. And then I start sending them letters, and I was just rapidly going downhill. I couldn't understand, because the whole reason that I left my ex, the whole reason was to save my son. And then he's just gone. Then I get a hold of his grandparents, who actually, the grandmother says, she has been told by her son that anything they received from me is to be thrown away. And she's just letting me know that she's going to be throwing everything away. And I just start comprehending the reality that he's not coming back. I don't even know where he's at. So months go by and turn into years. At some point, I just close his door. So one of his friends came over and said, hey, he had a lab set up and he was selling drugs. And he has 9 counts and of felony counts. So here's my son now a felon. Very luckily, he had some people that came up and spoke for him. And essentially he got an ankle bracelet, and he was in the house with my ex for 9 months. How can the intent of what I have done backfire like this. I don't understand. I don't understand this at all. I haven't seen my son really in 10 years, and he's never called me in 10 years, except a month ago he called me. So when he calls, it's like, hi, this is Greg. I'm like, hi, which Greg is this? And then he says, Mom, Mama. So the first 10 minutes were kind of rocky. The next 45 minutes, we bonded a little bit, starting a relationship. He shared with me that his girlfriend had just died from a heroin overdose, and he was devastated because of that. He doesn't trust anybody. Well, I didn't trust anybody when I was young either. And I tried to have the complete opposite for my son, that he would have someone to trust. And this is how it has played out. So after 10 years, he finally calls, the doors opened. I have hope. A woman's place for me now is, I am an author. I just wrote a book, a #1 bestseller. It is on Amazon. For Kindle, it's free for everybody. If you download it, it's $3.99. I now have a second husband who is a man who is very spiritual. He's honest. I feel safe with him. This is all about healing through your heart being broken. And I did lots of different things. And I've gone, twice a week for 12 years to learn the 12 steps, which to me are like my religion. This is from our book. It's Courage to Change, One Day at a Time in Al-Anon. And it says, there was a piece of reality that I never wanted to see. I loved someone who couldn't be trusted. Again and again, I suffered the disappointment of broken promises, contradictions, and outright lies. Each time I felt crushed, betrayed, outraged. Nevertheless, hours or sometimes days later, I put the incident out of my mind. And when the next promise was made, I trusted without hesitation and with my whole heart. I continue to find it hard to accept that I can't trust the promises of someone I love. Yet I see that most of my heartache has come from my own refusal to accept reality. Al-Anon helps me to trust my experiences more than the inconsistent words of others. Today I make a commitment to be honest with myself. By facing reality, I become someone I can depend upon. No matter how hard the truth is or what the facts are, I prefer to know, look at, and accept this day.